The American dream is often pictured as a white picket fence, a stable job, and the freedom to build a life of your choosing. But beneath the concrete of skyscrapers and the manicured lawns of the suburbs, a rot is spreading through the nervous system of the country. It is a rot generating over $100 billion a year in illicit revenue, an industry so massive it rivals the GDP of small nations. Yet it produces only one product: death. For decades, we knew the monsters under the bed: heroin, crack, methamphetamine. But the game evolved. The monsters mutated. Today, a new synthetic nightmare has taken hold of the streets, a substance so horrific it was never intended for human biology. It freezes users mid-step in a catatonic stupor. It eats their flesh from the inside out, leaving wounds that look like chemical burns and smell of decay. This isn't a movie. This is Tuesday afternoon in Philadelphia, Friday night in San Francisco, every single day on Skid Row in Los Angeles. The drug is called Xylazine, Tranq, and it has fundamentally changed the economics of the drug trade, turning the opioid crisis into something far more permanent and lethal. But this is bigger than addicts on a corner. This is about a global supply chain. The network stretches from chemical factories in Wuhan, China, to cartel strongholds in Sinaloa, Mexico, to the veins of a teenager in Ohio. This is the cold, mathematical precision of organized crime, where human suffering is just a line on a balance sheet. To understand why cities look like war zones, you have to understand the network, the machine. To grasp the horror of Tranq, you must understand the chemistry of the high. For years, fentanyl dominated the black market, 50 times stronger than heroin. But fentanyl has a flaw. The high is too short. Users hit the rush and are sober again in 45 minutes. For dealers, this is bad business. Too many doses, too much risk. Enter Xylazine, developed in the 1960s as a veterinary anesthetic for animals like horses and cattle. It was never approved for humans because the side effects were too dangerous. But cartels realized something. When mixed with fentanyl, Xylazine extends the nod for hours. It recreates the long, warm high of old-school heroin, solving the cartel's retention problem overnight. But the biological cost is catastrophic. Xylazine is a vasoconstrictor. It shrinks blood vessels, choking off oxygen to the skin. Tissue suffocates, then it dies. The result is necrosis, deep ulcers, crater wounds, skin turning black and rotting away. These wounds don't stay by the injection site. They spread. You can see bone, tendon, living bodies decomposing in real time. And because Xylazine is not an opioid, Narcan, our miracle antidote is useless against it. You can pull someone out of a fentanyl overdose, but the Tranq keeps them in a coma, slowing their breathing and crashing their heart rate. Nowhere is this more visible than Skid Row, Los Angeles, a 50-block containment zone that once felt desperate now feels apocalyptic. Skid Row sits in the shadow of the US Bank Tower. 10 minutes west, you're in Beverly Hills, surrounded by Ferraris and mansions. The inequality is staggering, and the connection is direct. Drug money often ends up laundered through the same luxury real estate, rising above the devastation. On Skid Row, the silence is what chills you. In the crack era, the streets were loud, chaotic, violent. Today, the streets are filled with the Tranq walk. People bent at the waist, fingers touching their toes, frozen in place for hours, swaying like statues. Outreach workers call it the fold. Entire encampments sit in eerie stillness. No movement, no speech, just bodies stuck in time. For dealers, this is the ideal customer: immobile, desperate, chemically anchored to a single block. But how does horse tranquilizer end up in the arm of a homeless veteran in Los Angeles? The journey is a masterclass in logistics. It begins in China. Chemical factories produce the precursors, the raw ingredients for Xylazine. They operate in a gray zone, selling kilograms labeled as pigments to bypass customs. A kilo can cost as little as $6 to destroy thousands of lives. From China, the chemicals move to western Mexico, into the domains of the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, two of the most powerful criminal organizations on earth. These cartels have industrialized the drug trade. Plant-based drugs require fields and harvesting. Synthetic drugs require only chemicals and a hidden lab, a basement, a garage. Inside these labs, university-trained chemists perfect the recipes. They mix fentanyl with Xylazine, often adding bright food dyes, purple, blue, pink, to brand their product. This rainbow fentanyl or Tranq dope gets pressed into counterfeit pills that look like OxyContin, Xanax, or Adderall. A college student buying a party pill has no idea they are swallowing a lethal cocktail of horse tranquilizer. Then comes smuggling. The US-Mexico border is the busiest in the world. Millions of cars and trucks cross each year. Border Patrol can only scan a tiny fraction. Cartels hide product in tires, gas tanks, car batteries. They use drones, tunnels with rail systems, every method imaginable. Authorities admit they can barely slow the flow. Once inside the US, the supply hits distribution hubs: Phoenix, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago. This is where wholesalers take over. These mid-level managers buy Tranq-laced bricks and prepare them for street sale. To boost profit, they cut the product with fillers, caffeine, baking soda, and more Xylazine, because it's cheap and adds weight. By the time it hits a corner in Kensington or Skid Row, it's a chemical sludge of unknown potency. The dealer doesn't know what's in it. The buyer doesn't know. It's Russian roulette with a needle. So why kill the customer? It seems counter to business logic, but in the drug world, addiction retention matters more. A fentanyl addict needs a hit every 45 minutes. They're unreliable, desperate, always on the verge of withdrawal. But a Tranq addict stays high for hours. Manageable, predictable, and Xylazine withdrawal is brutal, worse than heroin. Users experience severe anxiety, dysphoria, hallucinations, skyrocketing blood pressure. The fear of that withdrawal keeps them enslaved. Dealers have engineered a product impossible to quit without medical intervention, and the profits are staggering. A kilo of fentanyl costs a few $1,000s to produce. Cut with cheap Xylazine, it generates hundreds of thousands on the street. Cartels see profit margins of 2,000% to 5,000%. Human life, a rounding error. The US government is scrambling. The White House designated Xylazine an emerging threat, unlocking law enforcement resources. They sanction Chinese chemical suppliers, increase border tech, but the network adapts. Then one chemical, and China just tweaks a molecule to make a new, legal variant. Crack down on one route, and cartels shift to Oregon or Florida. It's whack-a-mole against an enemy with infinite money. The tragedy is that the victims aren't just junkies. Toxicology reports show Xylazine in cocaine, party drugs, recreational pills. People who never intended to touch an opioid are dying from opioid overdoses. The supply is contaminated. There is no safe lane anymore. We are witnessing the industrialization of addiction, not a drug problem, a structural collapse. Walk away from Skid Row, and the smell of rot fades into luxury cars and expensive perfume. But you cannot unsee the statues, the folded bodies, the living dead. The Tranq network is more than crime, it is a mirror reflecting the darkest parts of our global economy. What happens when profit outranks humanity? When demand is bottomless and supply is lethal? So what's the solution? There isn't a simple one. You attack the supply chain, yes. You hold chemical brokers accountable. But you must also confront the demand, the despair, the disconnection, the lack of purpose that drives someone to risk death for relief. Until we solve that, the network survives. The shipments continue, the dealers cut their product, and the bodies pile up. This is the game of drugs and death, and right now, the house is winning.